Welcome to another episode of the Thriving Immigrant podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you are tuning in for the very first time, I'm saying welcome to you. And if you've been listening to different episodes, I would say thank you so much for coming back. So please subscribe, share this episode with someone, and make and put a comment. So thank you so much for engaging with my content. I'm really excited about today's conversation. I have a special guest on the show. His name is Mohammed. Interestingly, Mohammed is the first guest that I'm hosting for the second time on the Thriving Immigrant podcast. The first time I hosted Mohammed, it was such an insightful conversation. Every time I think about taxes, the only name that comes to my head is Mohammed. So, and this is a new year. There's been a lot of changes in different tax policies in Canada, and I was like, there's no better person to have this conversation with than Mohammed. So join me in welcoming Mohammed on the Thriving Immigrant podcast. Thank you, Mohammed. Welcome back.
Thank you. That was a very encouraging introduction. I don't know if I deserve all that praise, but I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm so glad to have you. And thank you for all you are doing on Twitter. You've been very passionate about educating the community. And the good thing about the internet world is you don't even know, you can't really quantify your impact because some people are just there hiding, consuming your content, educating themselves, regardless of where they are, what they believe in, their color, and all that. So you've been doing an amazing job on X, and I'm really proud of what you are doing.
That means a lot. Thanks. I appreciate that. That means a lot. I really do spend a lot of time on my tweets, so it means a lot that you say that.
Okay, so the last time we hosted you, you were from Tax Heroes. Now it looks like there are some new things happening in your organization. It's like you are rebranding. So now you are from Copilot Tax, correct?
Yeah, that's right. We just thought we were more guides than we were heroes. We felt like heroes wasn't really what we were doing. We were more guides, so we thought co-pilot was more fitting as opposed to a hero.
Hmm. Okay, that sounds very interesting. All right.
That's marketing for you, right?
Makes sense, makes sense. I like it. Okay, so just to dive straight into the conversation, let me say the economy generally has changed significantly in the last 1, 2 years. And I'm sure that some tax policies have also changed. So, do you want to speak a little bit about the new changes to tax policies in Canada? Like, what should we be looking out for in the year 2025 and beyond?
Yeah, I think it's hard to nail down because there's a lot of things that were supposed to change and then didn't change, and there was a lot of uncertainty around. I think at the end of the day, in terms of pure differences from 2024 to 2025, things are actually pretty similar. But I think some of the notable tax changes or tax developments that happened during the year, the biggest one was that capital gains tax, the tax on capital gains was supposed to increase. And that was supposed to increase about, middle of the year 2024. And then the government has actually delayed that till January 2026. So I think that's probably one of the biggest changes in the year. One of the big things that people always bring up each year is CPP. CPP is increasing, and CPP is not necessarily a tax, but it is a deduction that gets taken from your paycheck. And so that's increasing. There's this new system of CPP 1 and CPP 2. And so you're going to be paying more CPP this year compared to last year. And generally each year, it should be going up with with how much wages increase as well.
All right. Thank you for mentioning that. We're all looking forward to the capital gains um, tax changes, and I think all of a sudden, maybe due to some political challenges that are going on in Canada right now, that was put on hold. Which, well, I don't know how I feel about that. It's not like the new rate is going to affect me anyway, but I think it really it changed the the environment a little bit. It made people more, it just gave that sense of calmness. And I think people, even those that are not going to be affected too, were like, oh, okay, this looks like a good news. Because sometimes I think people don't really understand those laws and those changes. They just feel like, oh, everybody's going to be affected. But I think not everyone will be affected. But even though it's not moving forward, I'm okay with it.
Yeah, I think sometimes people, they think they often misunderstand tax rules or they assume it's applying to them, and oftentimes it's not. But I also think there is a group of people, people, especially people with corporations, the first dollar of your capital gain would have been taxed at a higher rate. So I do think it really did affect people with corporations. But for the general population, it probably had no impact. But people with capital gains, sorry, people with corporations that have capital gains, they definitely were impacted.
Right, right. Yeah, you mentioned about CPP, Canada Pension Plan, and I really wanted to speak more on that in the sense that let me just explain what I know, and you can correct me if it's wrong. Every time we get paid, we contribute into Canada Pension Plan. That money is to kind of build your pension fund so that when you retire, the government can use that money to support you at retirement. And everyone making earnings in Canada is required to contribute into that Canada pension plan. So, but when you look at the amount that people are likely to get at retirement, it looks like that money may not be able to even sustain you at retirement.
I think it depends. So
Okay.
I think you're when we look at what people are getting paid out from CPP now versus what are people contributing, let's just say the maximum contribution is about, I think it's about 88,800, right? And I think like the maximum CPP, and don't quote me on this, it's just a very big approximation, is close to, let's just say 15,000 that people are getting right now. What we're doing is kind of an unfair comparison because we're looking at people who contributed in the past, uh, and what they're getting when their contributions are from the past to people who are contributing now and what their amount they can get in CPP in the future is going to be. And I think recently the CPP kind of changed, and now you have CPP 1 and CPP 2, and it gets a little complicated. But effectively, the idea is it replaces about 33% of your income, approximately if you're contributing the max each year, 33% of the income on which you contribute CPP with. So I think that is kind of a substantial amount each year, and it increases, right? So uh, as inflation increases or as wage inflation increases, the amount you're going to get each year is going to go up. And the amount you're contributing now, it will place 33% of the income when you retire, right? When based on what the income is when you retire. So I think it does make a substantial amount. And I think there's also, you could potentially look at income splitting with it. You can potentially there's also insurance benefits with it. So I don't think it's actually a bad deal. Now there are some reasons why you may not want to contribute some years. But in general, I do think it is a pretty good deal.
Right. I think I appreciate your input and your perspective. It's interesting that you're talking about insurance. I didn't know about that. So every time you contribute to CPP, you mentioned something about insurance. What insurance are you talking about?
Yeah, so when you contribute to CPP, you actually get a form of disability insurance. So if you were to become, basically permanently disabled, I believe like the threshold for disability for CPP is relatively high,
Right.
but they could pay you out an amount, CPP disability benefit, each year. So it's a form of disability insurance, as well. And let's say you have family or you have kids, and you pass away, your spouse or your kids can also benefit from, a form of life insurance, right? Really, from CPP. So I think if we look at it strictly from the investment standpoint, it's really not that bad of a deal. But when we also factor in that portion of it goes to kind of like insurance premiums, it
Right.
ends up being an even better deal, right?
Mm. That makes sense. That makes sense. Thank you for sharing that. So now for the CPP, we also have RRSP that we can take advantage of to invest towards retirement. And for you as a tax consultant, you know that this is the season when everybody want to contribute into RRSP so they can reduce their income taxes. So I've had some conversations with some people who are like, even if I contribute to my RRSP, I'm 30 years old today. I will need my money when I'm 65. That's 35 years from now. What's the guarantee that I will still not pay higher taxes at retirement? So do you want to speak a little bit about what happens to RRSP when you retire and you need your money, knowing that you've enjoyed some tax advantages in the contributing years and now you've retired, you need your money. How does government really, how do they calculate the taxes on RRSP at retirement?
Got it. So it's kind of just like earning any other income. So let's just say you earned rental income, your RSP withdrawal is considered like that, rental income or that interest income. So you are taxed on it. And I think, that's a fair concern. What happens if taxes increase in the future? Um, and I think that's a legitimate concern, but I think there's two things you need to think about in that situation. One, are you just and is TFSAs is that a big concern? And if that's a big concern, are TFSAs available? Two, so there's actually three concerns, right? Number one, is your TFSA available? Two, what if they actually decrease tax rates, right? Then you're actually better off, right? And then three, if TFSA is not available, then what's the cost of investing? What's the impact of investing in a non-registered account versus your RSP? And what you'll find is because of tax drag, even if tax rates go up in the future, you may still be better off investing in your RSP than just investing through a non-registered account or a regular account. Because there's no tax being taken each year, you have more ability to compound. And so I think these are the three things to think about, right? Ideally, what's best, right? Because it is a possibility, right? The government, runs a deficit. They could increase taxes in the future to make up for that deficit. It is a very big possibility. But what I say is try to use different accounts. Try to use the TFSA and the RSP so that if tax rates go up in the future, you still have your TFSA. If tax rates go down in the future, you have your RSP, which you'll get more benefit from. And that's not the only time, to think to use RSP. You could take out the money before retirement. There's other benefits. You could use it to buy your first home, to go back to school. If you retire early and you have low income in those years, you can take it out in those years. So I think you can potentially use it for income splitting. So I think uh, if you're thinking about it strictly as one person, sure. But if you're thinking about uh, you know, spouse or different years of income, and you have the ability to take out the money before you reach the age of 65, I think it's a pretty good idea to kind of invest in your RSP.
Right. Thank you. Have you had any client, have you worked with any client that is of retirement age and is trying to access his RRSP?
Yes,
Okay. Do you want to just talk to us a little bit about the process?
the process. So I think not once you turn 65, but usually when you turn 65, people start to think about should I convert it to a RIF,
Right.
right? Which is when you have to kind of start taking mandatory withdrawals. So there's minimum withdrawals you have to take. But you can also kind of get the pension credit and you can kind of split your income. So you have pension sharing. So 50% of your pension income can go on your spouse's return, right? So usually once you reach, 64 to 70, 71, you're having those discussions about should I convert it to RIF? And then once you do convert it to a RIF, right? Then you're thinking of, do I stick with the minimum RIF withdrawals each year, or do I take more, right? And sometimes you need more for your spending, for your planning. Usually I'm not involved in those discussions.
Right.
I usually in the discussions before, but typically that's what you're thinking about. What pools of money to take out from first? Should you take from your non-registered account? Should you take from, CPP? Should you invest your CPP income, right? It comes that discussion about when to convert your RIF and how much you should take out of your RIF each year.
Awesome. So now, just for those that are not sure about what RRSP, REEF, all these terms that we are using. So RRSP is Registered Retirement Savings Plan. REEF is Registered Retirement Income Fund. TFSA is Tax Free Savings Account. So if you are loving this conversation, please like, subscribe, share with someone, and let's educate the community one day at a time. Thank you so much, Mohammed. You've shared a lot of insight in just like less than 20 minutes.
Appreciate that.
So my observation recently is due to the economic challenges that some Canadians are going through, it's been it's been an interesting time recently. So some people are even thinking, you know what? I think I want to relocate from Canada. They are already Canadians, maybe some immigrant that moved some years back. Now they are thinking about moving back to either their home country or to a different country, but they still want to keep their citizenship. They want to remain a Canadian. They've invested over the years, and they are not sure about the tax implication of completely leaving Canada and what happens to all their investments, like all these registered accounts, non-registered accounts, maybe some real estate investments. So, do you want to speak a little bit about the tax implication of relocating from Canada? I never knew a day would come where we'll be talking about relocating from Canada. It has always been relocating to Canada, but it looks like things are changing and some people are thinking of relocating from Canada.
Yeah, so I think I know this question. I get so many of these questions every month. Not every month, I'd say every year. And yeah, it's becoming a big trend. So a little concerning, frankly, as someone who, grew up in Canada and, plan to live in Canada for the rest of my life. But regardless, I think the first thing you need to think about is, are you leaving to a country with a tax treaty or a country without a tax treaty with Canada, right? So if you leave to a country without a tax treaty, you kind of have to make a clean break. And it would probably be better or safer for you to kind of get rid of, your health, your OHIP card, your passport, things like that. Not saying that you have to, but it's better. If you're leaving to a country with a tax treaty with Canada, then you have a better chance, you have less risk of still being deemed a resident, um, even if you keep your passport or HIP, which is your health card or things like that. So I think the number one thing is find out if your country that you're leaving to has a tax treaty with Canada, or else you may still be a resident of Canada. And then we talk about the tax implications. So let's say you're going to become a non-resident for sure. What are then the tax implications? And I think there's two different ones you need to think about. There's tax implications on leaving, it's called departure tax, and then tax implications as a non-resident. So what tax you have to pay in Canada, even if you're a non-resident. So Canadian residents pay tax on worldwide income. Non-residents don't pay tax in Canada on worldwide income, but they may still pay some Canadian tax. So those are the two kind of categories of taxes. Now, if we think about departure tax, right, which is tax on leaving Canada, the general rule is that everything you own, the CRA basically treats it like you're selling it for the market value on the date you're leaving. So let's just think, you have 10 stocks of Apple. Let's just say you bought them for $1,000 and then they're worth 5,000 now, right? They've appreciated $4,000 and you hold these in a non-registered account. Then you have to pay capital gains on that $4,000 increase, right? There are exceptions to this rule, right? So certain things you don't have to pay departure tax on the appreciation. What are these things, right? These things are, your in your RSP. Whatever's in your RSP, you don't have to pay that. TFSA, if you have pension funds, Canadian real estate. So if you have a home or a Canadian rental property, those are exempt. And then if you have, but things that are not exempt, corporation. So if you have a corporation, if you have real estate outside Canada, investments that are in a non-registered account, these things are not exempt and you do have to pay the tax on the appreciation. So it can end up, if someone comes to Canada, and let's just say an extreme example, if someone's in Canada, starts a corporation, uh, like $1, and then that corporation goes to 10 million, you can possibly pay a capital gain on a $10 million value. That's about, let's just say 2.7 million of tax you'll have to pay. They may not have, that much in liquid investments, right? To kind of pay that tax. And so a lot of successful business owners sometimes say, we're kind of trapped in Canada. We can't leave because I don't have enough tax to pay that. And there are, if you don't have enough tax, there is options available. You could potentially put a security deposit, but it's just something to be mindful of. Now, there is one biggest exception here, that often doesn't get talked about a lot, but it is important. And it basically says if you were a resident in Canada for less than 5 years in the past 10 years, but just say resident in Canada for the past 5 years, less than 5 years, then anything you came into Canada with, you don't have to pay tax on that appreciation. You don't have to pay departure tax on that. So people who are in Canada for a short amount of time, they leave, and resident in Canada for a short amount of time, if they leave within that, and they're resident for less than 5 years of the past 10 years, then they could be okay in terms of avoiding departure tax. So I
Okay.
think, yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, thank you. I think you summarized it well, and of course, I know that there's a lot into this than just all you've said, but you can't spill it all on the show. So if you are listening to this and this is one of your concerns, it's better you connect with Mohammed. Mohammed will share his contacts, and now you can reach out to Mohammed for more tailored advice on taxes, whether it's departure tax or whatever tax or entry tax. I don't know if there's anything like entry tax, but
There's entry planning. Yeah, you could say there's definitely entry.
okay. So Mohammed is your guy when it comes to taxes in Canada.
Appreciate that.
You mentioned something about corporation, which is going to lead me to my next question. So, of course, corporation taxes is completely different from personal income taxes. We've seen people who are business oriented and they're just starting newly in Canada. Now they are not sure. They are in a dilemma of should I be a sole proprietor or should I incorporate my business? And maybe at some point, some people just jump on incorporation. Do you think sometimes some people incorporate too early, like what we can call premature incorporation? And when would you recommend that is the best time to incorporate your business?
Yeah, I think this is a very common thing. People hear, incorporation has tax benefits, and it does. Personal taxes can go as high as 54%. Corporate tax on business income can be anywhere from 9 to 12%. So there are benefits, but you have to understand you may not realize those benefits. So you have to kind of understand when incorporation makes sense and when it doesn't. And we have a nice, really nice flow chart on our website. And I have a tweet kind of coming out on this where I'm going to post the flow chart. But it walks you through all the different questions. And there's about, 8 questions that you should ask yourself, right? And I guess the first thing is liability, right? Do you want liability protection? Corporations provide, a bit of legal liability uh protection. And so that could make sense even without, the figures, without the income, if you're worried about that, to incorporate, right? Then you have to think about, is your income irregular or is it inconsistent? Like sometimes you have high income, sometimes you have low income. You can kind of shift your income a bit with corporations. And so that could be another reason why you incorporate. Then, if you're planning to sell a business, you might want to incorporate, but there is a little bit of, intricacies there. Depending on the type of business you have, and other facts, you might be able to pay family members dividends. And if you're able to pay family members dividends, then you can use their low tax. If they're at a low tax rate, then you can use their low tax rates, and it might make sense for you to incorporate. So I think those are the entry level, like the first set of questions. And then the second set of questions are really about spending. So incorporation kind of makes sense when you're spending less than you need, right? If you don't need all the income that you're earning,
Right.
personally, for your mortgage, for groceries, vacations, all that kind of stuff, then, there could be an advantage to incorporating.
Hmm.
And so there needs to be quite a bit of difference in order for it to kind of make sense. But I think, that's kind of the big issue. Sometimes people, do it even when they don't have a big difference between their personal spending, and their corporate earnings, their business earnings. Or some people, have a big difference, but they might, want to invest in securities, right? Stocks, bonds, all these things, and they have RSP room or they have TFSA room, and they might want to use that instead of the corporation. So, um, or they might have a lot of debt and they might want to pay down the debt before they, um, invest. So I think those are the tricky parts that people always kind of get, mixed up on. And sometimes it may not make sense for those people to incorporate, even though they hear about the tax benefits of incorporating.
Right. Wow, that was quite insightful. Thank you for sharing all that. And I'm sure someone is learning. And now the next thing is I've incorporated, but right now I've realized that I do not need this incorporation. Is there a way out?
There is. It depends, what the value of their business is and how much money they have in their corporation. Let's say you have nothing in your corporation and there's no value to your business, right?
Right.
Then you can just kind of dissolve or wind up your corporation and, you should be fine, no issues. And then you can carry on the business as a sole proprietorship as yourself without a corporation. But if there is value to the business, or if there's a lot of, cash or investments or capital built up in the corporation, then it's kind of like you're paying yourself a dividend to close up the corporation, right? You're taking that money out of the corporation, or you're taking that value out of the corporation. It's almost like you're paying yourself a dividend. You might have to pay tax, depending on how much money is in the corporation, or how much value there is to your corporation.
Hmm. Oh, I see. I see. Okay. Thank you, Mohammed. I don't want to keep you for a longer time. We can continue talking about this for hours, for all day. But I think this is a good point to just end it for this particular one so that when next I invite you, you won't tell me no. So thank you so much for coming. Is there one or two things you would like to share with audience, how they can contact you, and maybe one final tip on tax planning?
Got it. So, I guess tax planning tip. By the end of the month, you can, or even a bit or close to it, you can still make RSP contributions, and now you can make cash donations, and it'll still reduce your 2024 taxes. So keep that in mind. You could still save tax before the end of the for 2024 before the end of the month. If you do want to contact me, you can reach us on our website, copilottax.ca, or you could just DM me on Twitter, Canada Tax Guy. And I respond pretty well, so feel free to ask me any questions you might have.
Okay, thank you, Mohammed. So just to mention, end of the month that Mohammed is talking about is end of February. So look, I don't know when you'll be listening to this. If you are listening maybe in August, don't think that you can save taxes for that year by contributing into RRSP or donation. So there is always taxes in, and when you can contribute into maybe RRSP or donations to reduce your income tax for that year. It's usually the maybe last day of February. Sometimes I think for this year is 5th of March. I don't know why they extended, but I think you still have till 5th of March 2025. to either contribute into RRSP or donations.
Is that right?
Yeah, do you want to confirm? I think
Uh, 3rd of March, yes. Oh, wait,
third
yes, 3rd of March, yes.
third of March, yeah. So they extended to 3rd of March this time. On this note, I want to say thank you so much for coming, Mohammed. Thank you to everyone listening to me. Please share this episode with someone, subscribe, and comment and make comments whether you are listening to me on Spotify, Apple, or you're watching on YouTube. Let's grow the community together. And thank you for always tuning into the Thriving Immigrant podcast. Thank you, Mohammed, for sharing your time with us. We really appreciate that.
Thank you. Thanks for having me again. Really appreciate it.